Who or what committee or commission or agency was responsible for dreaming up this grandiose and sinister project, and why was it necessary? What is the rationale or justification for such a project, and was the President of the United States aware of this? An iconic quote from the joint hearing by Senator Inhumane in 1977. In 1977, the U.S. Senate Committee of Intelligence, Subcommittee on Health and Scientific Research, and the Committee on Human Resources all met to discuss the harsh truth behind the series of behavioral modification experiments performed by the CIA during the Cold War. These experiments were revealed to be more extensive than what we initially thought. The Central Intelligence Agency drugged United States citizens without their understanding or agreement. American people had their trust violated time and time again during the 1950s and 60s when the unethical testing occurred, but yet again in 1973, this dark hole was dug deeper when the bulk of CIA's records of these experiments were destroyed. Several responsible officials have refused to take accountability and recall the details of these documents. What exactly were these experiments? From 1953 to 1964, what's known as Project MKULTRA occurred. This was an umbrella project, which means there were many sensitive sub-projects of experiments that included research in an attempt to alter human behavior using different substances. Work was performed in hospitals, clinics, pharmaceutical companies, prisons, and colleges for a grand total of 80 different institutions. A lot of these experiments used university facilities and took advantage of lead researchers and other faculty without their knowledge. Nefarious acts were hidden in plain sight and conducted in complete secrecy for 22 years before becoming public knowledge. It was believed that all evidence for Project MKUltra was destroyed until 1975, when the truth was revealed about the tragic death of Dr. Frank Olson, who was working as a civilian employee for the Army at Fort Detrick in Maryland. He had died all the way back in 1953. Dr. Olson was in New York City, and after unwillingly consuming lysergic acid diethylamide as an experiment administered by CIA researchers, he leapt from his hotel room window. During the experiment, the substance was put in his bottle of liquor that he later drank unaware of that fact. Shortly after consumption, he began showing symptoms of paranoia and schizophrenia. This man was known for his outstanding ability according to his colleagues and was a seemingly mentally sound person prior to the experiment. He was an expert in aerobiology and worked to assess offensive attacks using biological warfare techniques for special operations of the US Army. He fell into a severe and deep depression, noticed by close friends and family. After his untimely demise, there were cover-up efforts to distance the CIA from being associated with his death. Unfortunately, there were other people of these tests that suffered similar fates despite their attempts for psychiatric care. In 1975, 7 boxes of documents were discovered with materials pertaining to these human experiments during the investigation of CIA records. This uncovering of new materials was due to an unknown error in procedure that caused sensitive material and the correlated financial data to be sent to the wrong location in 1970, 3 years prior to the retrieval and destruction process in 1973. While a large chunk of these recovered files were finances and accounting, there were other critical documents found as well. The first being a set of documents that included 149 MKUltra sub-projects, all tying in with the research of human behavioral modification, drug creation or testing, and the administration of said substances in secretive ways. Secondly, there were a couple boxes that held information in regard to the concealment of the funding mechanisms for these experiments to distance the CIA's involvement of various projects and research. Third, there were 33 other discovered sub-projects that consisted of previous Central Intelligence pursuits that have nothing to do with altering behavior or similar matters. Uncovered were 149 shocking sub-projects and the 15 categories that broadly summarize these disturbing activities. Number 1 is research into the effects of behavioral substances and alcohol with human testing. The second category are documents on the research of hypnosis, involving 2 sub-projects combining hypnosis with mind-altering substances. Number 3 is the acquisition of chemicals. The fourth category included the delivery of drug-related chemicals in covert operations. Number 5 is the studies of human behavior, psychotherapy, and sleep patterns. The sixth included searches of libraries and attendance of seminars and conferences surrounding behavior modification. Number 7 was the study of what motivates people, research on defectors in society, and behavioral training techniques. The 8th category consists of polygraph analysis, also known as lie detection. 9th is the funding mechanisms for MKULTRA's external research ventures. Number 10 comprises of research on toxins and biological processes of human tissue, exotic pathogens, and the integration of effective delivery methods. The 11th category contains pursuits whose end goals cannot be identified from the available documentation. Number 12 involves funding assistance and connection with the Army's Special Operations Division at Fort Detrick to study biological agents and delivery systems of people, animals, and crops. The 13th category is made up of all single sub-projects such as electroshock, harassment techniques, analysis of extrasensory perception, gas-propelled sprays, and crop sabotage. Number 14. Controlling animal activities, energy storage, and transfer in organic matter and stimulus response. Lastly, number 15 were cancelled sub-projects including the study of biologically active materials tested through the skin of people. MKUltra Sub-Project 54's goal was perfecting the use of sound waves and other weapons to, without warning, give concussions and amnesia to human subjects without leaving any physical marks. This is a chilling concept that there's little available information on, but emphasizes the lengths in which the CIA will go to, the morbidity of these sub-projects, and the complete lack of authorization and supervision. It is unknown how successful this specific sub-project actually was. One phase of MKUltra involved physicians, toxicologists, and psychologists. General hospitals and prisons were used for testing hallucinogenics and other various substances on human subjects. One of the first studies was located in a Lexington Rehabilitation Center in Kentucky. This addiction research center served as a prison for addicts that were sentenced for drug violations. In the final phase of their testing, undercover officers secretly dispensed lysergic acid to non-volunteering subjects in their normal life settings. Their justification to these unethical research practices claims that using accepted scientific methods doesn't provide enough information. There was a belief that communists had used chemical and biological agents for interrogation as well as brainwashing purposes. Whether true or not, this belief was the rationale behind these immoral experiments. These procedures were under the guise of being defense-oriented, but these substances were often used to harass, discredit, disable, and interrogate unwilling human subjects. In Project Derby Hat, the Army Chemical Corps' third major phase of field testing focused on chemical warfare. There were 16 unaware US subjects that were given lysergic acid and interrogated. During Project Third Chance, again, 10 soldiers that were unaware they had been given mind-altering substances had undergone rigorous interrogation. They were told implicative lies about intent to steal classified documents, as well as accused of being foreign intelligence agents. Some of these people had completely broken mentally, showing symptoms of extreme paranoia while under the influence of these chemicals. There were a series of tests performed in 1958 where, after unwitting administration of lysergic acid, subjects were completely confined to isolation chambers. During Project Derby Hat 1962, several foreign nationals in Asia whom were suspected of involvement of narcotics and foreign intelligence were interrogated, again by use of mind-altering chemicals. Supposedly, these tests were ran to see if different effects occurred to different races of people. The Army and CIA took a very aggressive role in understanding techniques such as mind alteration, physical intimidation, electric shock, and hypnosis. Even though it was recognized that chaos could arise from these developments, programs and testing continued on Americans and foreign people overseas because of the perceived threat of national security. The Army's testing was done very similarly to the CIA's research across Europe and farther east. Wanting these experiments to be completely secret, again, was used as a means to justify neglecting supervision, authorization, informed consent, and follow-up examinations. The most controversial details of these programs were not sought to be approved by the executive branch or Congress, and were held with the utmost of secrecy. Steps were taken to prevent the American public from becoming aware of the unethical and illicit ventures that took place for over a decade. Rights of individuals were violated and ignored for the 10 years of testing, and many lives were jeopardized. Since the records of MKUltra were destroyed mostly, it became impossible to know the full extent of the largest CIA program involving chemical and biological agents. What we do know is that CIA officers needed these projects and their details to be restricted to as little amount of individuals as possible. What had also been noticed in the conclusion of many results is that there are many inherent medical dangers in these substances and experiments. Chemical-induced psychosis was quite normal under the influence, but took on chronic forms long after the effects of substances have worn off. A lifetime of schizophrenia was oftentimes the result of these many unethical, unsupervised, and unauthorized human experiments. Sadly, no one was held accountable for these egregious experiments, with the CIA being instead reprimanded and told to prove such mistakes won't happen again. A new structure had been developed since the court hearing to ensure there won't be any future oversights and abuse. The records show that no agency employees that participated in MKUltra had been terminated. Thanks again for joining me here on Epochs and Eons. If you'd like to see more videos like this in the future, please subscribe.